Hey, everybody, and welcome to this episode of Mixed Martial Analysis. And this is episode number 40, I believe. And today, what I want to do is I want to take a look at the UFC 249 early prelims. It's been so long since there's been a fight on. I figure, might as well look at the whole card. I'll break it up. I think I'm going to break it up into segments and do 3 different podcasts. On the first one, this one right here, we'll do the early prelims. On the next one, we'll do the regular prelims, and on the last one we'll obviously do the main card, right? But on the early prelims, you've got Sam Alvey versus Ryan Spann, light heavyweight bout. Brice Mitchell versus Charles Rosa, that's a great fight. And number 13 ranked Vicente Luque versus Nico Price. And Vicente Luque is coming off a fight against Wonderboy. And before that, I would have to look. Let me look. I actually have his page pulled up right here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He was riding a 6-fight win streak before his loss to Wonderboy. And Wonderboy is such a hard matchup. He's such a difficult matchup for a lot of guys, man. A lot of guys. But Vicente Luque is very good, and this is actually a rematch. These two have fought before, and Luque beat Nico Price. I think he got him with a darsh. So, a pretty good card already. Every single one of those fights has potential to be really exciting. And then you move on to the prelims. And like I said, I'll cover this one later in the week. I'll probably put another podcast out on Saturday to go over these fights right here. Kicks off with number 10 ranked Uriah Hall and number 14 ranked Jacare Souza in a middleweight bout. Carla Esparza is taking on Michelle Waterson. That's a top 10 matchup in the women's strawweight division. Alexio Linick is going to be fighting Fabricio Verdum, two of the most accomplished submission artists in UFC history, in MMA history. And then number 6 ranked Cowboy Cerrone is fighting number 15 ranked Anthony Pettis in a welterweight bout. So, that's a great fucking fight. Moving on to the main card. That could be a card. The prelims could be a card. Probably not a pay-per-view, but you could easily put that card on ESPN and people would tune in to watch it and be excited for the main event between Cowboy and Pettis. It's a great fucking card so far. And then you move on to the main card. Greg Hardy's going to kick things off against Yorgan De Castro. Jeremy Stevens is fighting Calvin Kattar. I love that fight because Jeremy Stevens packs so much fucking power, and he's a seasoned veteran. Like sometimes, like people, he leans on his power too much. But if you watch like Jeremy Stevens fight, his game is very well rounded, and Calvin Kattar has some of the best boxing, in my opinion, in the featherweight division. So great fucking matchup there, and That has potential to be a real barn burner. That's like fight of the night potential right there. Francis Ngannou is fighting Jairzinho Rosenstrike. Again, man, two guys with incredible knockout power. Great matchup. Heavyweight. You hate to say. I'm not even going to say it. You know what I'm going to say? I'm not going to say it. Because every time somebody says some shit like that, it never happens. So I'm not going to say it. All right. Bantamweight title bout between Henry Cejudo and Dominic Cruz. I actually don't know, admittedly. I don't know whether like the coronavirus is what impeded Jose Aldo from being able to fight, but Dominic Cruz is stepping in to challenge Henry Cejudo, and I know that this fight is going to be, there's a lot of dispute over who should have gotten the title shot, and personally, I think if, and again, this is where like Dana White is probably a better businessman than a lot of hardcore fans would be, right? Because you would think that Jan, Sterling, or Sandhagen they're the most deserving of the shot, right? But Dominic Cruz is, if you look at the resume, probably still the greatest bantamweight of all time. Hard to argue that he's not, especially after what happened. TJ Dillashaw accomplished what he accomplished, but then he got busted for steroids. There's always going to be an asterisk beside his name now for everything that he accomplished up until he rights himself, right? And even then you think like, God damn, well, how much of a leap did he make? Just because like, if you can recover, you can train more. And if you can train more, you can like, you get like a big jump. He gets more time to perfect his technique and stuff. Like there'll always be an asterisk, as sad as it is, beside TJ Dillashaw's name, which is a shame because he's an excellent fighter. And anyway, I think Dominic Cruz is still probably, if you asked most people who they thought the greatest bantamweight of all time is, it's still Cruz. And he's going to be fighting Henry Cejudo. So it's still a great fight. And again, from a business perspective, I understand why they made that matchup, because Dominic Cruz just sells better than those other three. His name is more recognizable. Do I think it's right? I don't know. Like I said, I probably would have given the fight to Jan Sterling or Sandhagen, one of those three. It's a hard decision between, and especially because none of them have ever fought each other. So it's kind of hard to decide. And they each have their own argument for it. But I don't know. What can you do? And then finally, Justin Gaethje is stepping in to fight Tony Ferguson, because Khabib, having trouble getting over here due to all this fucking shit. I think he went down to Abu Dhabi and then found out that, like, he had to go home. I don't know. All I know is he's not fighting. Fucking Ferguson versus Khabib seems to be cursed, right? But the great part about Ferguson versus Gaethje is that if it can't be Ferguson versus Khabib, this is the next best thing. This is the true number one contenders bout, if anything, right? Like, I understand that Tony Ferguson is undoubtedly, as of right now, the number one contender. But these two are probably going to collide at some point anyway. And if Tony Ferguson can go out and beat Justin Gaethje, then again, it just adds to the magic when Khabib and Tony fight. But if Gaethje can go in and, especially if he can finish Tony, it does so much. It makes the Khabib fight so much more compelling, especially because of Gaethje's strong wrestling base. I would give the advantage to Gaethje on the feet if those two fought, I would say, right? And Gaethje has maybe a better takedown defense than somebody like Conor. You know what I mean? Because of the wrestling base that he has, and he just never uses it. You never get to see it. So it is interesting. And like I said, these guys are probably going to collide at some point anyway, so at least we're going to figure it out. It's going to be a great fucking fight, and Dana White has said that the winner is going to get Khabib. So, rightfully so, right? Anyway, let's talk about some of the other fight announcements that have been made. I want to get through these real quick and then kind of get on to something, not really like Bellator or MMA, like professional MMA related, right? More just like, what are you guys doing in quarantine to keep up with like your training and shit like that? But I want to go through these fight announcements real quick because there's some really interesting ones. Hannah Cyphers is I got all these from MMA Junkie, by the way. I don't ever pretend to be like a journalist. That I'm just a fucking fan, man. I'm not like I'm just giving you my opinions on what the fuck everybody else reports. So I'm basically doing nothing, right? But Hannah Cyphers is going to be fighting Mackenzie Dern on May 23rd. Eric Anders is fighting Krzysztof Jocko on May 16th. Carl Robertson versus Marvin Vettori on May 13th. Arlovsky versus Felipe Lins on May 13th. And then Anthony Hernandez and Kevin Holland on May 16th. And if you're wondering, man, those events sound like they're squeezed really tight together. Like those dates they are. The UFC is going to be putting on, I think it's 3 events in 8 days, right? And then they take a 1-week break before putting on the event on May 23rd. And a lot of the headliners are to be determined, but they're slowly building these cards. All this coronavirus shit, there's been a lot of like talk about whether Dana White is doing the right thing. And I don't want to get in to like the moral debate about whether it's right or not, right? But I think this is what I think about Dana White. I think that if you look back over the UFC's history, Dana White just strictly always does what's best for business. Whatever's best for the UFC as a brand. And you can't deny that when people have, and especially now that tensions have eased up a little bit surrounding the virus, I think we're starting to find out that fatality rates are a little bit lower than we originally thought. And people are kind of wanting to get back to a normal way of life. Like people are getting fed up with the shit kind of, right? And when you think about normal life, you don't realize it till it's gone, but you don't realize, like, live sports are so ingrained into our culture. Every time you go to the bar, every time like it's on ESPN, people are, even if they're not on, people are talking about it, right? And when it's gone, it feels like something's missing. Like I think just we love competition. So when you get to see it, like, you know what I mean? You don't realize how weird life is without it. So what Dana White is trying to do is capitalize on that, because people, like I said, and he's going to get a huge audience because there are going to be so many people who are just sitting around and they're going to tune into fighting just because it's the only live sport on. There's something about it being live, right? Like you can watch replays of the same fucking Super Bowl over and over and over again, but it'll never be as exciting. It'll never feel the same as when you're watching it live. If Dana White can get on, he's dominating that market and he's going to get a ton of traction. And like, if you just look back at his track record and like the things that he's been criticized for doing, it always pays off for the UFC. Like his decision to kind of, everybody criticized him because he wanted to move to the Reebok deal, right? And it was going to affect fighter pay and it was going to do this and it was going to do that. But I mean, they're on ESPN now, man. And if you look back at when like, I don't know, I think about like Frankie Edgar fights and stuff, right? And they've got all these things. He's got like his fucking Iron Army or whatever it is plastered all over his shorts and it's all like on, it looks bad, man. And I didn't mean to call Frankie Edgar. I just thought of Frankie Edgar because like he's one of my favorite fighters, and I think back to like I used to always make sure I tune into his fights because I went to the same college as him, right? And I think about like how bad that looks compared to like the UFC, the gear that they have now. It's like, man, it's way better. It's way better. So he's always thinking in terms of like I think he's putting all the moral shit aside and saying what's best for the UFC. You know, and this is best for the UFC. There's no denying that people are going to tune in and watch that shit. And he's going to maybe gain some new fans. So it's a big deal. And, you know, it almost still feels like, I almost feel like it's still not real. I almost feel like I'm like, is this really going to happen? But I don't know. We'll see. So far, so good. People seem to be committing to it. You've got guys like Rogan announcing it. Alec seems pretty excited about it on his social media and stuff. So, I mean, it seems like it's going to fucking happen. And also there's just so much going on this card, you know. It almost seems too good to be true. I hate to say that, but we'll see. I think fingers crossed, right? Anyway, assuming the fight does move. Oh, okay. No, never mind. I don't want to move on to breaking these down just yet. I wanted to talk real quick about what you guys are doing to kind of, and leave some shit in the comments, right? But I want to know what you guys are kind of doing to keep up with training during quarantine. And this has kind of been these are my thoughts on it. I've kind of been like going over it, right? And I think that a lot of people like probably don't have the ability to do anything but drill, right? And I think that a lot of people kind of neglect drilling and opt to roll, but your mechanics and closing and like tightening up those movements and stuff is super important, and just being able to, you know, it's like the muscle memory. So I think that this is a good time to like grab a grappling dummy, right? And focus on drilling. And I know some people have the advantage of maybe their spouse or maybe their like roommate or something practices as well. And they're able, like, that's obviously better. If you have a training partner, it's obviously better than just using a dummy because you get a little bit of resistance. But like my advice to people who can't do that and are maybe kind of concerned about those people like jumping way in front of you, I don't think it's quite like that. Like I think that they have the advantage of, you know, obviously getting live. They're getting like live reactions from the person. So they get a better, and they're getting a better sense of whether their moves are working or not. Right. And there's just something about using a dummy that's still not quite real. But I still think there's a lot to gain from using the dummy. And you got to remember too that like, it's not like they can go, even people who can train with somebody else, it's not like they can go. I'm just bringing this up because myself, like I've thought about this shit, right? I'm like, damn, it would be really nice to have a drilling partner. Like I don't have the luxury of having one, right? I can't, like, I just don't have one. Like my fiance doesn't do it and I don't have a roommate who's interested in it, right? And maybe I'm justifying this here, but like, cause I'm not denying that it's better. It's definitely better to have a live partner, 100%, no doubt about it. Like there's like I said, there's no simulating that. But for people who don't have it, I would just say not to get too discouraged, because like what you get with a gym membership really is looks with different people and people who have different styles and different games developed, and there are different levels. There's purple belt, like, you know what I mean? There's different body types, and there's so much that you get at a gym. And then you get, I know our gym is experimenting with doing live Zoom classes and they're working pretty well, but it's not the same as having an instructor there correcting things while he's watching you live. You know what I mean? That you're just losing something there still. And they've still been a big help. Like anything is better than nothing, right? But nothing replaces the gym atmosphere. Like that's what you get when you go to the gym. you couldn't become a black belt just training with 2 people in your fucking garage. Well, I mean, theoretically maybe, right? But you get what I'm saying. It's not like people are going to be jumping from, blue to purple belt over this quarantine while you're just stuck behind. Like, I think kind of the most important thing going into this are going to be the people who kept up with their mechanics and the people who just, and conditioning as well, you know what I mean? And trying to simulate what it's going to be like to go back and have to like roll again, man. Because have you ever taken a break from jiu-jitsu and then you go back and roll and you're like, like one round, you're like, man, I forgot. Like, you forget how quickly you can lose your cardio. Anyway, so I've been trying to work. My main takeaway from that rant is I've just been trying to work on drilling. And like I said, I'm fortunate enough that we do have live classes and we have a professor and he's taking you through some drills, you know what I mean? So he's giving you some guidance and he can kind of see you and point you in the right direction. But there's so many variables, right? Like, is the camera pointing at me? Can you actually see what I'm doing? A whole bunch of shit, right? That just complicates things and makes it more difficult. But, and then another thing that I've been focusing on is this is just my opinion, but when you watch like a UFC fight, it's easier to follow the jiu-jitsu and stuff that they're doing. I don't want to say it's watered down, but it's more fundamental because it has to be more honest, because you can get hit in the fucking face if not, right? Like, you see people try to tie up leg locks all the time and the guy's just like, oh, fuck you, cracks him in the face. Like, sport jiu-jitsu is a different game than MMA. But when I think that it's easier for me at least, especially being at the level I'm at, like I'm a white belt. So I've been doing jiu-jitsu for like 4 years. So I'm like familiar with it, right? Like, I'm by no means great at it, but I think I'm proficient at it. And I have trouble though when I watch guys who are, when I say proficient, I mean for my experience. I don't mean like I get stomped by like a lot of people, right? Like, I don't mean by any means that I'm good at jiu-jitsu. I just mean like I kind of know what's going on, right? Like, I can defend myself. But when you watch MMA, you can watch things develop more slowly and you can realize what people are doing wrong and what they're doing right more easily. Whereas when I watch like advanced competition matches, gi or no gi, sometimes I watch them, man, and I'm so lost because it's pure sport jiu-jitsu and there aren't really like consequences. So things at that level, things can expand. So there are exceptions, right? Like, some people rely on fundamentals almost solely, but it expands into this thing that's so far detached from fundamentals, and just me personally, I'm not a fan of a bunch of fancy shit. I just like things that work. And like, I think that if you watch people who are really great at jiu-jitsu, it's not that they like Damian Maia's and stuff like that. And, it's not necessarily like you get people like Brice Mitchell who are implementing, he's on this card that we're going to break down, right? They implement that shit really, really well. But a lot of guys like Damian Maia just have a path to your back and he finishes you from there. You know what I mean? It's just solid fundamental jiu-jitsu, but it's like shoring up the little things, the little tiny details that you might be missing when you're rolling, right? So, try to pay attention to that kind of stuff. And I like watching MMA for that reason, because it's almost slowed down, because like I said, things are just a little bit more honest. You get a more honest feel of how your jiu-jitsu would apply in a fight. And for that reason, it tends to be more fundamental than fancy. You get guys like Gary Tonin coming in that I think are kind of he'll revolutionize it, and then it'll go back, like people will find a way to defend it, and then it'll kind of even back out. That seems to be how the game works. But, yeah. Those are my thoughts on kind of like keeping sharp and trying to just, what can you do you can obviously watch tutorials and stuff on YouTube and stuff too, right? Just let me know what you guys are doing in the comments. I want to know what you guys are doing to keep up with your training and to stay sharp during all this bullshit. All right, let's move on to breaking this these early prelims down finally, right? First up, we've got Sam Alvey fighting Ryan Spann. And Ryan Spann debuted against Luis Henrique, won a unanimous decision. I think he's a Dana White Contender Series veteran. And right now, he's riding a pretty impressive win streak of he's 17-5, and he has won, 2, 4, 6, 7 fights in a row. He's actually got 11 submissions on his record. And I think that his striking is so aggressive and like he's coming straight down the pipe at you with shit. And he has some serious power. And I think people then tend to want to wrestle him and take him to the ground. Like you saw that in the Henrique fight. You saw that in the Devin Clark fight. Devin Clark wanted to take him down and wrestle him, but they sleep on his jiu-jitsu because I think his striking is like, they realize how sharp it is and then they want to take him down and then they're like, holy fuck, his jiu-jitsu is really good too. So I think people tend to sleep on that a little bit. I don't think though that Sam Alvey is going to be the kind of guy who's hunting for a takedown. And seeing what he's seen from Spann, like knowing that Spann has 11 out of his 17 wins via submission, I don't think he's going to be trying to drag this to the ground. Sam Alvey's more of a counter puncher. He's going to be backing up and, waiting for you to come in, waiting for you to make a mistake. And then people sleep on Sam Alvey with his stand-up though, right? Because he doesn't, if you look at him, he's not intimidating. He's not sculpted like a Greek god or anything, but he can fight, man. He's very good. People underestimate this man a lot. And he is he packs some serious power in his hands, and he's a gifted counter striker. Now you've seen recently, he suffered a string of, I think it's 3 defeats in a row. The last one came against Klidson Abreu. The one before that against Jimmy Crute, and the Jimmy Crute one is one that made me. The way he came in and the punch that got him dropped was he was like faking with. I can't remember exactly. He was faking with one and trying to come up over the top with the other. But Jimmy Crute just sent, I think, a right hand straight down the fucking middle and dropped him, and that's kind of what kicked things off. Kind of a questionable stoppage. Sam Alvey got pissed off afterwards that I believe it was Mark Goddard that refereed that. But that worries me because Ryan Spann is so precise and he does fight behind the jab. And like when you watch his knockout over Antonio Rogerio Nogueira, right? I mean, he fires off a right hand and then he fires it off again and then comes through with the left uppercut and knocks him out. And it's like, man, I think there's going to be a speed difference, and I think it's going to be hard. Sam Alvey's going to be looking for those counters, but Spann comes forward and he's so aggressive, and he comes just like I said, straight down the pipe, and he's so good at heading guys off. I don't know if Sam Alvey is going to be able to slip out of the way. I think there's going to be a significant speed difference. Also, the fact that Spann is riding a 7-fight win streak and Alvey's on a 3-fight losing streak is making me want to lean towards Spann. I just think that Spann he's going to have the advantage on the ground. I think, like I said, I think his jiu-jitsu is very solid. And I also just think that his forward pressure is going to be overwhelming for Alvey. I think Alvey's going to try to he's going to be trying to play the counter game, but Spann has a really good gauge of distance and timing. Not that Alvey doesn't, but Alvey's going to be coming out wide to counter, and Spann keeps his hands up and fights behind the jab well. I think he's going to eventually find home for the power shot, and I think he's going to finish Alvey in this fight. Good matchup though, and like I said, don't sleep on Sam Alvey just because he's lost 3 in a row. Like, I mean, in a lot of his fights that he'll lose, he'll hurt the person. Like he might have dropped Jimmy Crute in their fight. I can't fucking remember now, but he's competitive and he's dangerous, man. So and also keep in mind the fact that he's desperate right now. If you're riding I want to see how many losses. Yeah, he's riding a 3-fight losing. He's on a 3-fight losing streak, man. So, he's a cornered animal. You don't want to sleep on him. He can definitely put you out. Let's move on to man, Vicente Luque and Nico Price is a great fight too. But out of these, I'm really interested in this fight right here. Brice Mitchell versus Charles Rosa. This is kind of like the Civil War, right? You got a guy from Arkansas and you got a guy from Boston. And both very prideful of their hometowns and both very talented and very unorthodox and both really, really high-level grapplers. This is a really exciting fight. When you watch Charles Rosa, people don't want to go to the ground with him, but his striking is so unorthodox and so wild and so that it's effective. I mean, like he implements it pretty well. You know, this is a guy who fought to a split decision with Yair Rodriguez, and Yair had the clear advantage on the feet. I think Charles Rosa learned from that, because when you watch him fight Kyle Bochniak, he's starting to throw some spinning stuff. But yeah, man. I mean, Yair had the clear advantage on the feet, but when it went to the ground, it was all Charles Rosa. You know, and he's got, I don't know how many submission wins on his record. He's a black belt in jiu-jitsu. And I like when guys have a specialty in something. And then this is what I really like about Charles Rosa. Maybe my favorite thing about him. I like that he's a black belt in jiu-jitsu, right? And I like that he knows that striking isn't going to be his strong point. And it's not that his striking is not technical, but like, I like that he finds a way to compensate for that by being unpredictable and kind of wild and throwing shots from angles that guys aren't really expecting, right? And they're not really seeing. And he finds a way to make it work. And then it sets up his jiu-jitsu, because it allows him to work in takedowns and stuff. Charles Rose is really well-rounded, man. Really good fighter. And that fight against Yair Rodriguez, and I mean, especially if it goes 5 rounds and it maybe starts leaning towards the grappler because his cardio starts kicking in, you never know, man. So definitely a lot of potential in this guy. He also fought Shane Burgos. Burgos, I mean, just outpointed him over the course of the fight mainly. But I think that, I mean, Charles Rosa found success in that fight. And then Manny Bermudez, who's a very good wrestler, took him down. And Rosa hit him with an armbar off the back. So, I mean, his only 3 losses are to Shane Burgos, Yair Rodriguez, and Dennis Seaver, who at that point, that was his UFC debut. And Dennis Seaver is a veteran, man. So, I mean, that's a tough fight. That's a tough fight to come in and take for your UFC debut. And his losses are all to really notable names and guys with a lot of promise. And he's taken on Brice Mitchell, who is he was on that season of Tough 27. And I think they used to list his, I could swear that if you go to one of his Fight Pass fights, they'll list his record as like 12-1 or 11-1 or something. But he's listed on like Wikipedia, Tapology and shit like that. It's 12-0. His most recent fight was that twister that he pulled off against Matt Sales. He picked up a unanimous decision win over Bobby Moffitt before that, in a fight where they had some crazy grappling transitions and just 2 guys who really knew what they were doing on the ground got to go at it. And then he beat Tyler Diamond via majority decision at the Tough 27 finale. I think Brad Katona won Tough 27, and Brad Katona also beat Brice Mitchell in an exhibition match, I believe, on The Ultimate Fighter. I'm pretty sure. Yeah. And anyway, Brice Mitchell, really talented. He uses some really creative. Everything about his game is creative, you know. He's really good on the feet, really smooth, really good footwork. And then when it goes to the ground, he's got nasty jiu-jitsu. And it's, like I said, his ground game is super creative. And it's going to be, this is a really hard fight to pick, because Charles Rosa is a black belt, and obviously his game is very advanced as well. But Brice Mitchell sometimes the purple belt will catch. I don't know what rank Brice Mitchell is, but sometimes the purple belt will get the black belt. And sometimes it's like Brice Mitchell might have that creativity factor. You know what I mean? Like, where he's a little more willing to experiment with his game. I don't know. Sometimes that shit happens. And sometimes because of that, you can catch guys and things that maybe they haven't seen before, right? You're going to get a really, really interesting grappling matchup in these two if it goes to the ground. I don't think it's like they're going to go down there and one's going to completely dominate the other. I think this battle is going to be won in like the in-between moments. Like, you know what I mean? Like the little moments in between all these grappling exchanges, like maybe things like who's doing more damage and like who's maybe threatening with the submissions more. And then obviously I'm going to give the slight edge to Brice Mitchell on the feet, and then I'm going to give the slight edge to Charles Rosa on the ground. But like I said, don't sleep on the creativity of Mitchell on the ground. And if it goes there, I think it could go either way. You know what I mean? I would lean towards Rosa, given his experience and the fact that he's a black belt, blah, blah, blah. But it's not like Mitchell couldn't finish the fight somehow from there. So really fucking interesting fight. I'm going with Brice Mitchell just because I think that he's going to be a little bit faster and he'll have a little bit more snap on the end of his strikes. And I think that will allow him to implement like an offensive jiu-jitsu game maybe at some point, maybe get some takedowns. And I think this is such a fucking – I've gone back and forth on this one so much, but I'm going with Brice Mitchell. I think it'll be a decision, though. I think he's going to have a hard time finishing Rosa, but I think, like I said, I think that it'll be like those little moments, and I think that I think Bryce will have a slight advantage on the feet. So we'll see. We'll see. I'm going Brice Mitchell via decision, but that fight is so fucking close. Great matchup. All right, and the last one we're going to talk about today is number 13 ranked Vicente Luque, who is 17-7-1, and he's taking on Nico Price, who's 14-3-0, and he's got a no contest thrown in there as well. Vicente Luque is coming off of a loss to Stephen Thompson, but before that, he was riding a 7-fight win streak. And, a 6-fight win streak. And Nico Price is on that list. So is Chad the Priest, Jalen Turner, Brian Barberina, Derek Krantz, Mike Perry. Now, the problem with that is that there's nobody truly elite, like at the top heap of the division until you run into Stephen Thompson, and Stephen Thompson handled him pretty well, right? But I just don't think Vicente Luque is there yet. Just not quite yet. I think he's a top 10 fighter, but I just don't think he's quite ready to crack into that top 5. I think he will be with a little bit of work, though. I mean, he's very fucking good, very dangerous. But yeah, this is a rematch, and the first time that Vicente Luque and Nico Price fought, Luque caught him in a darsh. And since then, Nico Price has gone on to do some pretty impressive things as well, though. You know, Nico Price has that win over Randy Brown where he caught his foot behind his head and knocked him out with strikes from the bottom. He has an upkick win over James Vick off of his back. Crazy. The way he finds insane ways to win. He knocked out Tim Means, lost to Jeff Neal in a fight where there was almost a double knockout, and where he actually just that fight kind of came down to grappling. Jeff Neal just had a grappling advantage. Knocked out by Abdul Razak Al Hassan, who, by the way, is a killer. If you're wondering where he is, he was accused of rape, and then he was actually just recently found not guilty. So I think you'll be seeing his name around again. He's a very promising prospect at welterweight. But yeah, anyway, Nico Price, Vicente Luque, great matchup. I love this rematch because, like I said, Nico Price has gone on to do so many impressive things since then, as has Vicente Luque, and I feel like they're two different fighters now. They're much more refined, and I think that Nico Price has kind of found his identity a little bit. Like, I think he's leaned in more to the fact that he is fucking kind of crazy, and like that he does get these wild finishes. You know, I think there's something about like discovering that about yourself, and like I think he's probably always known it, but it's like a self-realization thing, you know, and he's implementing it better now. He's like turned a corner in a sense. And Vicente Luque is, I mean, his striking is very, very technically sound. He fights heavy on the front foot. He likes to press forward, and he likes to come straight down the pipe with everything. One of the weapons that you really got to watch out for, and he throws it all the time, is his flying knee. He's always looking to set up his flying knee, and he's got a really good understanding of timing and distance and range. One thing that you will notice, and that I think Nico Price will probably pick up on, is that you can tag Vicente Luque when he's coming in on his entries. After he throws his combos, he's got very good head movement, very good footwork. He gets out easily, and he gets back in position to throw more strikes. But sometimes you can catch him on the way in. He's very good on his exits, but he's he's lacking a little bit of head movement on his entries. And Nico Price, like you look at the Tim Means knockout, he caught Tim Means coming in a little lazy, and he's got serious knockout power. So he might be looking to exploit that. I'm actually leaning towards Vicente Luque in this fight because of the fact that I don't like what I saw from, I mean, like, don't get me wrong, the upkick was fucking awesome that he landed against James Vick, but I don't like what I saw from him on the ground against Jeff Neal, and I don't like what I saw on the ground from him against Vick. And I think that if Luque fights if Luque backs Nico Price up in this fight, gets his back against the cage and like uses his strikes to set up the takedown, maybe. I think that you got to remember, man, Vicente Luque has 6 submissions on his record and 9 knockouts. So he's well versed in, you know what I mean? It's not like he doesn't have a submission game, man. He can tap you out. I actually wouldn't be surprised if you saw Vicente, like I said, Luque try to cut off that space and maybe turn this into more of a grappling heavy exchange because he thinks he has an advantage there. If I'm Nico Price, I'm trying to keep my back off the cage. I'm trying to keep space in between myself and him because I'm explosive. My knockout, I feel like that's how I generate power on these like kind of water looping shots. Nico Price, very technical. Again, I don't know if you call him unorthodox, but the angle that he throws things at and like his timing on things is just a little bit different. Like it's unique. He has a unique style. It'd be a good way to put it. And if he leverages it, and like I said, the self-realization thing, when he leverages it effectively, he's very dangerous. So I think the key is going to be a lot of movement, staying in space, and trying to land that shot that hurts Luque. Because I don't think that Nico Price is going to have an advantage on the ground. It's not like he's going to be going for takedowns. And like I said, I think Luque is going to he's going to want to march him down and establish he wants to get the striking range in his world. He wants it to be in his world, not in Nico's. So that means closing off the space and keeping things tight and negating the power shots, right? And then maybe looking for the takedown, I don't know, or engaging in the clinch. But I'm leaning towards Vicente Luque in this fight just because I think that he does have an advantage on the ground and in grappling, and I just think that his style is it's a little more favorable in this matchup because I think that he'll just be able to like stay high and tight, march Nico down, and find success that way. I'm going Vicente Luque. I don't know if he'll be able to finish him. It might just be a kind of fight where he wears on Nico and beats up on him. But yeah, I like Luque. Maybe, I don't know, man. Luque could get it done anyway. If Nico Price wins, I think it'll be by knockout. I don't think Nico Price will beat Luque up over the course of 3 rounds. But I think if Luque wins, he could win by submission, knockout, or decision. But I think that does it. I think that wraps up the early prelims. Like I said, I'm going to put another one of these out on Saturday. Make sure you guys hit subscribe. Leave me some comments below, suggestions, whatever. Throw whatever you want in there. Just if you want to bullshit about the fights, throw it in there. Yeah, subscribe. Like if you're listening to this on iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, this is available on YouTube as well. And obviously for YouTube viewers, vice versa, if you don't want to watch the video. Thank you guys for tuning in. And I will catch you next time. Bye-bye.